Indeed, chat, we are late. It is the way of things. The usual story of the channel at this point. What can I say? I'm as bad as every other streamer, late every single time. I'm just the worst person on earth. But it's important that you should know that we were having the most serious conversation you can possibly have off air, which is to say we were discussing beards. With in particular. But with that said, I assume I assume we will have something vaguely serious conversation looking, or possibly just go back to talking about beards. For those that don't know, and there are probably a pretty substantial amount of you, this is the second time Rick and I have talked about any number of things because Rick is a great guy, and I told him he should come back. So there is a prior stream on the channel. You should indeed go check it out. Yes, Rick was muted. Rick is no longer muted. Indeed, my boomerism knows no bounds. What can I say? So, in just a moment here, there will indeed be audio. So, thank you all for telling me, because let's face it, I probably wouldn't have noticed, and we'd have half of a podcast where it was just me talking to silence. So, with that said, welcome back, Rick. Just in case the vast majority of people who showed up since last we spoke have no idea who you are, you want to give them a quick rundown?
So, I'm the author of The Uniqueness of Western Law, a reactionary manifesto. That's the subtitle, just to get alt-writers and people like that a bit excited, get them buying the book. And I've also written for the Mises Institute. I'm a fellow for Mises UK. I'm a little bit of an oddball there because my tastes in terms of liberty are a little bit more medieval, a little bit more on the natural law side of things. But yeah, I really enjoyed our last conversation. Pleasure to be back. Don't know if I've missed anything. Oh, yeah, that's it. I'm also managing editor over at the Warden Post. The Warden Post is posting just generally sort of right-wing ideas, some of it a little bit more intellectual, some of it more sort of history nerds, other stuff, just things that your average Trump voter, let's say, would find interesting. Yeah, that's all I've got to say for myself.
Sounds fair. So, because I do this all of the time, I have noticed this recent thread, and it is fairly recent, where nearly all of us that are in this sort of game, this standing up saying something, have this thread of we're all big history buffs in one fashion or another, sometimes hyper-targeted, sometimes kind of widespread. This really makes me think that this failure to teach history is now effectively the sum total of our problems.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's more the shame of our history as Westerners, and particularly, I suppose, there's this element of the white guilt aspect of it. You're supposed to be ashamed, and I get it. I get the shame of colonialism because I understand where the left is coming from in terms of critiquing colonialism. I get it. I understand. Especially, I mean, this may have something to do also with the fact that I'm part Italian and I'm part Irish. So listen, I get the arguments that we Europeans, and this is important for Americans to understand in terms of your history as well. We were as much victims of the establishment on a global scale of this economic class, which was just far and beyond monarchs. Even they were just in a completely different realm in terms of the financial power which they were able to wield on an international scale. And we sorry, go on. What are you going to say?
Example wise, are we talking East India Trading Company, that sort of thing?
Well, of course, but I mean, also look at what happened in Ireland. So, I mean, Irish people now would be made to feel guilty about their history. right? Now, where was this great Irish colonialism? Where was that? Where was that? It doesn't exist, of course. In fact, the Irish were taken advantage of. Their, common lands, religious land, church lands, which would have been used by guilds and would have been used by villages. All of these sorts of things, they were dissolved. And the same is the situation in England. This is why I'm saying this. These kinds of things. They were something that was done to us, and this is in part why so many people wanted to flee to the New World, because there they could have, freedom. They just had a certain freedom. This is why so many fled from the Netherlands to South Africa, for instance.
Yes.
Their way of life, the freedoms, the ancient freedoms that they had, they were under attack. And how were they to be preserved? By getting away, by doing your own thing somewhere else. And so, this is kind of why we're history buffs. We want to know what makes us different. We want to know where does our concern for freedom, which doesn't exist elsewhere. Let's be perfectly honest. Let's be blunt here. It doesn't exist elsewhere, and we want to know where did we come from? What makes us different? Because we're at such a crisis now in the West in a number of different ways, and so we want to get to the bottom of it. We want to find the answers. We want the kernels of truth. We want to find the seeds of truth so that maybe we can plant them again.
So I think no small part of our problem is a man who I have nothing but disdain for, the Howard Zinns of the world, right? And for anybody, I mean, I bring him up often enough, but still, Howard Zinn wrote The History of America by Howard Zinn. And it is a, let's be vaguely generous and say, different way to look at history. And there is this premise under his entire method that everything in history needs to be quantified by victims and aggressors. And if for any reason, if you won, it doesn't matter if you won because you were the underdog or not. If you won, you were the aggressor, and we know that because you won. And this sort of way of looking at anything is how you get this massive victimized mentality, right? And most, one of the worst examples of this in any history I can think of is the Crusades. Oh my God, the Crusades were a big holy war that were just the worst things ever because they just wanted to kill brown people, which isn't even a phrase that existed until the 20th century, but sure. But you go back and you look at about 5 minutes before the Crusade, and what do you find is that the Crusades were kind of a defensive war where they said, no, we're not just going back to the border. We're going to tell you that you don't get to do this anymore. And if you don't like that, if you don't like what's happening now, then you won't come to our cities again because we're not putting up with this. But nobody wants to hear that because we won the Crusades, right? The Western world portion of the world won the Crusades. Therefore, you were the aggressor. Therefore, they were the victim. Therefore, we're the bad people. There's a lot of even the general structurized argument about colonialism. Well, it was just the British Empire trying to take over the entire world. At various times, maybe, right? Make no mistake, there is some conquer the world mentality in there. But the flip side of that is, okay, we're done colonializing for a while because we've got to at minimum secure what we've got. And the tribe next door goes, well, I used to like that tribe, so we're making war on you because a couple of them escaped your colonies and now we're coming for you. To which the colonists, wherever they were on the planet, went, well, I mean, you're not really giving me a choice here. I guess we're fighting then. But you can't have that discussion if everything needs to be, aggressor and victim. Because despite that these are the people who scream nuance from the rooftops, they have no idea what this word means.
Absolutely. And I find it difficult to play devil's advocate here because I agree with you so much. I'm going to end up just parroting what you're saying, but I mean, especially on the Crusades. I mean, come on. I highly recommend for all your viewers a YouTube channel, Real Crusades History. Now, he's really good. He's really good, and his stuff is very well researched. But I mean, yeah, most of the Christian capitals of the world had been conquered. It was hundreds of years later, constant aggression before the Crusades occurred. I mean, okay, if I was going to disagree on something, it's, you said we won the Crusades. Well, I mean, which crusade are you talking about, really? And I mean, look what happened. I mean, the Ottoman Empire at the gates of Vienna. Well, there we are. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet. Come on. In a sense, it's still not over. I mean, yeah, we had our victory. The Poles came, thank God. The Winged Hussars helped, as well as other allies, and we pushed the Ottomans back. I mean, there's still half of Constantinople. Did I say that? I meant Istanbul. That's technically European land, and that's that's still under the control of Turkey. And well, I mean, did we win exactly? But the thing is, if you would have asked a Turkish person, I mean, let's say even like 100 years ago, if you'd have asked someone in the Ottoman Empire what was left of it, well, what do you think about the Crusades? They might not even have known what you were talking about, let alone it being this thorn in their side, all those horrible people that came over. It's a very recent phenomenon that in the Muslim world, they actually care about this stuff and they moan about this stuff. And Osama bin Laden, it was very bothersome for him, and he was able to use it as a talking point to rally support. And really, it's leftist historical revisionism, which has led to this. I mean, that's another important point why I think we care so much about history on the right. It's because it's fundamental to our identity. It's really fundamental to identity. It's one of those things that are under attack. And it's one of those things that we can easily, and without being oppressed and without being publicly attacked, it's one of those things we can do something about. We can learn about, we can buy great books, well, still just about. And learn about. Yeah.
Just about. I guess to be fair to the criticism in there, what I should have said is we won the Crusades. But very realistically, that is the case. I think about the fundamental to who you are, right? Generally speaking, in the broadest possible senses, the right honors in some fashion, some quantity of tradition, and there is no possible way to do that without knowing some history, right? You can't have a tradition if there wasn't a yesterday where we were doing a thing. And so it becomes a raw necessity of doing those sort of things, right? Yesterday, what may have been wrong, but it wasn't inherently just because it was yesterday. And before you can even say that, you have to have some idea what happened yesterday. And so you get, and make no mistake, the aggressiveness of the left on this subject is very much, well, yesterday you were double-headed Hitler and you hate everyone on the planet. Like, whoa, I don't think that's how that worked. Let me go look. And we are very incentivized to be this way because of effectively everything,
Yeah, I quite agree. Yeah, you've got to look at also the moral climate now and understand. Well, I mean, look at it this way: the public discourse at the moment is totally dominated by a particular system of morality. It's not total chaos where everyone's an individual and we're all blah blah blah. No. It's not. Don't be fooled. It's not quite like that. There is a single system of morality which is controlling the public discourse, and it's intersectionality. So this is where something is a minority, it requires protection. It requires protection from the state. The state is like this, the kind of guy who seeks out single mums, seeks out the vulnerable. I will protect you.
Can I suggest that was a tactical choice based on a generalized Western philosophy? Because the more time that I spend with history, the more what I see is that we who honestly care about anything other than this globalized control, again, I'm not attached to the descriptor here, communism, globalism, whatever it is, right? The more we try to stand up for anything right, good, righteous kind of right, the more you will see in a historical timeline sense, 5 minutes later, that will be reframed by the people who care about the global control, care about, communism, again, call it whatever you want, as this is why you need to do what we want. And my citation for this is, of course, very American, because I am. However, this is a reframe of the premise of the Electoral College, which is to say, will of the majority with the consent of the minority, because we need to sort of protect their point of view in the world. We need to make sure that what we're not doing is having generalized mob rule. And so what the people who want to destroy everything that's good in the world here is, so you want to protect the minority. So what we need to do is hyper-focus this on protecting the minority, because you already agreed to the premise.
Yes.
You're already in. And then they can go on the attack for what they always wanted. And you see this with some of the ideas of the Magna Carta being reframed in the same way, right? Where
yes,
the individual is an important minority, and so when they come to you, they say, "But my radical individualism," and you say, "Yeah, but you just group everyone into these massive groups and then call them minorities." And
yes,
they say, "Well, we're protecting the minorities," when they are self-evidently not.
Yeah. It's this terrible thing that modern liberalism has done, which is that it presents itself as being the savior, literally the savior of the individual and his individual freedom. What actually is happening is the central state has to be presented, but because with modern liberalism, there's a certain pluralism of beliefs. You don't have specific communities with very specific cultural frameworks, a religion, whatever it's going to be. No. The whole territory, the whole nation must have pluralism. The creed of liberalism is that there are no public beliefs. There are no public, except for that one creed itself. The public belief is there are no public beliefs. There are only private beliefs. Now, where am I going with this? So what happens then is out of necessity, you have to have a very strong, very powerful, centralized state, which, again, out of necessity, it's got to be a middleman, an insurer for all of our interactions, all human interactions between every individual, has to insert itself, has to impose itself. And the problem there is this has interrupted what was a much more organic, a much more natural balance that was being formed throughout Western history, from Greece to Rome, and especially in the era of Christendom, where you had subsidiarity. You have this balance between the individual and the state. Responsibility and decision-making must be as local to the issues and as local to those whom the decision will affect as possible, right down to the individual. Right down to the individual. Of course, there are occasions where something needs to be done by a more collective structure, by something a little bit more far-reaching. But the problem with having the modern centralized state is that, well, look at our situation right now, Don. So you can just say, oh, look, COVID's here. That's very serious, isn't it? Emergency powers, please.
Yeah.
And this is the story of how the modern state came into existence in the first place.
I think what you're describing is again yet another, because one of those things that I have really come to decide is true is that we need to stop giving these people the benefit of the doubt, right? They consistently demonstrate bad will. And if you consistently demonstrate bad will, I am not I tire very quickly of giving you the benefit of the doubt. Just, nope, that's it, we're done. And so, when there came this idea again from what I think is again a very tactical choice, that when the liberals of the world said, well, you can make your own decisions and you can be, responsible for your life, right? We're talking effectively Enlightenment liberalism, kind of at that moment, right? Is they said, well, you can make your own decisions, but you will be responsible for your own actions. Then came the people who said, well, if you can make your own decisions, those have to be enforced. And this is basically the premise by which we get to where we are. This is the difference between the 90s left screaming credo, it's okay to be gay, versus you have to let 500 naked men run down the middle of the street and expose themselves to children. Because saying, look, whether or not what you're doing is morally repugnant, what we're not going to do is chase you all down and overtly go after you. Just we're pretty sure that God will take care of you in the end, so go away, right? As long as you're not causing some other problem, we really don't care. And then you go from that to, well, if it is acceptable, their choice is acceptable, then the follow-on of their choice has to be acceptable, right? And there is no indication that that needs to be true, right? Just because you are willing to shoot heroin doesn't mean that you should then have someone pay for your heroin because you want to shoot more heroin. These things are not connected, and we pretend like they are, for sometimes no reason I can even discern. But this is the game, is you take something that would otherwise be righteous and good, and you pervert quickly. Strangely enough, this is, to the Christendom example, this is very biblically Luciferian in that sense, right? Wherever you go in the Bible that they're talking about Lucifer, this is, the Lord of lies, but he doesn't generally just overtly lie to you so much as take something that is a truth and twist it and then tell you to move forward that way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. Difficult to know where to begin, but I in some of my writing, I have tried to distinguish in Western thought what I perceive to be two general competing ideas. There's a Christian one, which developed, and it did develop out of Greek thought, and that promotes free will, and it promotes certain ideals, which we are all sort of imperfectly, but sort of attaining towards, and we recognize them. We can't do without them. We can't think properly without these. And it's a great disservice when we ignore them, especially on a public scale. And the idea is not so much to control nature and control our fellow man so much as it is to encourage and to try and promote responsibility as much as possible in other citizens. Now, okay, generally contrasting that, you've got the other way of thinking, which you described as Luciferian, which otherwise is described as Gnostic. This is the general thinking of liberalism. This is really even at a subconscious level, this is the way of thinking which really drives and motivates, especially our elites. But I mean, you just see it everywhere now. The general thinking is we don't have free will. You know, the universe is just a deterministic place. we're just machines, effectively. What kind of freedom can you have? Well, we can try and escape our nature as much as possible. We can try and control nature as much as possible. And of course, our fellow man is a part of nature, right? It's about controlling nature, including human nature, as much as possible, and having a predictable control over it. And you see, this is why, I was talking just now, and you were talking about it, why in modern liberalism what we have is this drive. It's it's incentivized, it's idealized to have ever smaller, more controllable identities and groups. And of course all groups now, and individuals actually, have to be legitimated by the state. It's not like in the old days where you have a guild, and this guild, like, it has political power, it has authority, it has its own authority. Universities just have their own authority. They have their own laws. They had sovereignty. Cities did. They were, free cities. And so that's all gone now. The only identities we have left are those which the state can control, and it wants to keep those identities as small as possible. And things like families, where you have organic identities, where you have relationships built on unconditional love, which is really primordial. Yeah, that's as our brains are developing a sense of me and the other in our mother's womb. And, neither of us would be sitting here having this conversation right now if we did not have unconditional love by someone to look after us in our formative years, right?
Fairly unlikely that the 2-year-olds are getting jobs.
Exactly. Although I'm sure the elites would like that too. But it's a different subject. These things are very primordial, but it doesn't fit the bill. It doesn't fit the bill for this Gnostic way of thinking that really it's more than it's just been imbibed by modern liberalism. I think it is the fundamental worldview, the life world, if you will, of modernism in total, but especially of liberalism. So this is why liberalism loves, these small, look at me, I have a different hairstyle, different hair color to everyone else, and I have a different gender to everyone else, and this kind of thing. They love it, and they promote it, even at a loss. They promote it to us. They promote it in everything, because they can have greater control over all of us. Sorry.
No worries. I think you're veering a little bit, and maybe I just sound like a cynic at this point, but
have I gone crazy? No. You said Luciferian. You set me off. You triggered me.
No, I think you have veered a little bit into giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? And unintentionally so. But here is the level of unrepentance I have for not giving them the benefit of the doubt, because there is the sales pitch portion. They will come to you and they will tell you about, the blue-haired, astral gendered whatever, and how great that is. And in there was the mention of the family and how this is a cohesive unit, and they go after that all the time, and they have been since time immemorial.
Yes.
My standing theory is that Marx effectively codified what these people do, but and added a little bit of his own
Well,
thought, but
yeah,
that was mostly it. And even at the time where Marx sort of forges it into this one single codification, you find him saying, we have to destroy the nuclear family. It is a
yeah,
problem. And the reality of this is, as long as you can keep people separated enough, unfamiliar enough,
yes,
you can promote a quantity of control that is otherwise literally impossible, right?
exactly.
If you go to a family home and you say, I'm here to enact violence upon this family, the whole family will stand up and say, no, you aren't, right? If, however, you go to a building that happens to have 8 people in it that none of them know each other, and you
Yeah,
say, I'm here for guy number 7, the other the other 7 of them say, well, who the hell's that guy? Who cares, right? And
yeah,
this is what amounts to the final extension of the term divide and conquer, or the phrase. Excuse me, the phrase divide and conquer.
yeah,
You are so atomistic that there can't
yes,
be a mounted resistance to anything, no matter how terrible, even
yes,
if the other 7 people are watching guy number 7 have horrible things to him, they don't know, any of those individual 7 doesn't know the other 6. They don't
yeah,
have a capability to get together and say, look, even if we don't know that guy, you're not allowed to do that, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
this is the cynical, just terrible by every description thing that you see continuously happen when these people get power, right? Because this is the method by which the KGB got no resistance in the Soviet Union. Everyone was terrified to the point of near infinite atomization, and so no one will stand to help. And even if you could get 4 or 5 guys together, they couldn't get anywhere between 6 and 10, because 6 and 10 would say, well, I don't know who you are. You might be part of the KGB, right?
exactly.
And this is how ridiculously terrible these premises are, right? It's why when you read the Gulag Archipelago, it's the same thing, right? Solzhenitsyn talks about, the best of us didn't survive. The best of them, in his own description, were often trying to get people together to say, let's work together. And everybody else went, how about no? You might be a plant. Even, your life is terrible, but you might be trying to get people to work together to sell that information to the Soviets, to get out of here yourself because, or survive long enough, make sure you're taken care of by the guards.
Yes,
You get the same thing in, the death camps in World War II, the
yes,
atrocities of history. This super atomization is required to accomplish them every time.
yes. And you see that's the bystander effect is such a strong thing, really. And as you said very well, at other times in history where organic relationships would have been able to form and really mold what was going on in society, institutions, law, etc. These sort of things would have been impossible. You couldn't go into the building. If you go into a company building now and you want to destroy everything, well, everyone will just happily leave.
Yeah.
Everyone will just happily just leave the building, let the thing burn. Oh well. You see, this is how distance. You see, the left prey on this when they say, "Oh, look how you've been alienated from your labor," and these kinds of things. That's not it. That's not it. We've been alienated from each other and from responsibility.
Well,
I'm go on.
again, I think that's a tactical choice, right? Because certainly there was a time, right? And you can see this in the creation of Woolworths, I want to say. I don't
Okay, yeah,
where in the beginning of his life, he wrote a book about his life, and in the beginning of his life, he goes to a grocer, and I don't think it was Woolworths. I forget who it was, but if the story rings a bell, and I'm sure it will because I've told
yeah,
it a lot, chat, let me know. Or by all means, Rick, let me know. He goes to a grocer and he says, hey, I really need a job. And the guy says, okay, be here, tomorrow morning before the sun rises. And he says, great, what are you going to pay me? And he says, pay you? I'm going to teach you the business. You should be paying me. And, worth noting that he did indeed eventually create whichever empire it was of stores that he had made. Montgomery Wards, right? Is who it was. And he created the Montgomery Wards of the middle of the 20th century, which was the owner, effectively, in the way that we think of Walmart right now, of most of this kind of commerce, and eventually went back, bought that guy's store, and did indeed employ him, right? And we have gone from a group of people willing to take that risk, willing to say, look, you do have a thing of value to teach me, to your employer is now someone who is cheating you out of the maximum of your labor. And that is just pure Marxist rhetoric, right? Profit is just excess value being extracted from the worker. And we don't say that out loud when we talk about it, but, you produce $20 of value per hour for your boss and he only pays you 12, he's cheating you, is original Marx reframed for the modern era. And it is a division where that guy didn't have to hire you, right? He, to some degree or another, is taking a risk on you. He is reaching out and giving you a thing. And now we are the ungrateful swine of the world to say, well, you did reach out and give me something, but you should have given me more. And this division was minted in the Western world, at least, for 100 years before we got to the level that we're at now.
Yeah. And, there's another element to that story that you told, which is that mentor, he was inviting that person, to have more than just a transaction relationship. There was a personal relationship as well. There was a want to develop this person. It was seeing this young guy, or clearly thought he was clever. It was seeing the potential in him, where he could go, and it was looking at them in a much more holistic way. It's looking at his whole life and the relationship that they could have. It reminds me also of Henry Ford. Not the perfect example, not the perfect model, but what's he doing there? He's trying to build a community out of this.
Yeah.
He's trying to build a life for the workers. He's giving so much. And it's that proper sense of the corporate nature about being part of a corporation. And when I was saying we've been alienated from responsibility, I mean, perhaps a controversial take, but I'm not fond. I'm not. well, wait until you hear what I'm going to say first. I think the turn where legally we made corporations persons, and again, it's an identity that is legitimated by the state. It's necessarily dependent on the state. When we did that, we made all kinds of offices within companies that could act with impunity. They're not liable for doing things which, if they did otherwise, would be terrible crimes. So it's this liability that we ended up creating within companies, and what that does is it creates a culture of not taking responsibility within a corporation. Then all of a sudden you have far from something like a guild, where it would have totally been about everything you just said. It's totally about, when this guy joins us, he's like our brother now. We're completely united in terms of liability. I'm very responsible for him. This guy's going to be my little brother now, if I'm his mentor. We're so far from that. I go into the building, I go into the company, and I've got no skin in the game, really.
So
not really. I can go somewhere else. I'm that detached. I'm that detached from it.
maybe I should have let you finish, because now I will object strenuously that you're starting too late in history. The reason that we have corporations is diffusion of responsibility. And so if you want to know when the beginning of diffusion of responsibility happened, look at the advent of the corporation, because it wasn't always a thing, right? There were partnerships, which you could effectively call corporations. There were not quite board of directors, but, groupings of people who got together and ran a business and had equal say, which sounds like a corporation. But corporations are a legal manifestation of companies who said, well, we can't be held liable for all of these non-crimes that you're coming after us for. So either we have a way to diffuse that responsibility, so it's not that if someone gets food poisoning from one McDonald's anywhere on the world, the CEO of McDonald's goes to jail. And again, CEO being yet another legal creation to diffuse the responsibility. But, the owner of the company can't go to jail because one guy, one place got food poisoning. That's ridiculous. You can't be doing that. And that is how the late 19th and 20th century legal turns started to go, is that, and I am not intimately familiar with them, but I have had some discussion on the child minors in England thing, right, where the public will sort of started to instantly turn against these people. And it was, well, we should lock up the owners of the mine because one child died doing something. And I understand the want for edification there, but if you're going to do that, corporations will be the output. And so, hang on a second, apparently my allergies are...
Let's see.
Thank you. And so I mean, you come to this point where, and again, there is a lot of Marxian thought here, because a lot of what was happening was punish the bourgeoisie for exploiting the proletariat, because the bourgeoisie are here to destroy your proletarian capabilities. See, they just want children to die in mines, blah blah blah. On they go. And so I can't say, I mean, is the legal apparatus that we have now good? No, but it is very much an act of self-defense by people who were being legally, as it were, persecuted, which I'm sure is a thing no one wants to hear. But if you start a lemonade stand and some guy buys lemonade, drives down the street, spills it in his lap, and then gets into a car accident, is it your fault? And should you personally be held legally liable if he hits a pedestrian and kills him? Should it be you that goes to jail instead of him?
Sure.
And that's the law that we live in. That's a very real possibility.
Let me take it even further back in history, because where the corporation really started was, and not exactly in ancient Greece with the city-state, a bad English translation of it, but the polis. Mm-hmm. That was not a diffusion of responsibility in the sense of relinquishing responsibility. It was a diffusion of responsibility in terms of making others responsible for things, imposing duties on other men. So it's a different, again, this is a very different way of thinking. We're not used to it because we're so used to relinquishing responsibility to the state, again, as the middleman for everything, mm-hmm. ensuring everything we do, everything about us, rather than taking responsibility for things. We're perfectly happy just to go along with an insurance company rather than join a neighborhood watch and actually be responsible over our neighbors.
Indeed.
So we're very alienated from that. Now, what came along was the strongest form of corporatism that has ever existed, which is Christianity, the body of Christ. So this is where our word comes from, actually. When we're talking about corporation, this is Christian language we're using. The corpus means a body. Now, all baptized, well, at one time they would have been citizens, of the Holy Roman Empire, but baptized Christians, they were we consider ourselves, I should speak more personally, to be a single body. We actually are Christ's body on the earth. We are in him, he is in us. We are one with Christ, and we are a single entity in a mysterious sense. And we actually become a family. We're so united. We are, a spiritual family. And the purpose of this was to be imposing responsibility and duties of care on each other. And that's important, that language, duty of care. So fundamental and so central to Anglo law, so fundamental to law that you in America would share with the legal system we have here.
Right.
Part of the Anglo common law is this sense of duty of care. So, I mean, in many ways, it's really about how we look at it, how we're going to be thinking about it. Because your country was founded on people who really understood the principle of subsidiarity. Yeah. Remember I said where responsibility has to be as close to the individual as possible?
Indeed.
And I'm talking about duties being imposed on you have to be taking responsibility for something. You cannot relinquish it to some higher authority or higher power. This is completely alien to how we think now. We cannot wait to relinquish responsibility. We cannot wait. And I mean, this, it's the same all across the West. I'm not saying anything about American men. I have great respect for, the American man concerned with liberty and having their guns and all the rest of it. But
I'm smiling because one of those things that I harp on perpetually is that no one is coming to save you and you have to get up and do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. And you see, that's a very important message. I like that. But as soon as we start talking about corporations, you say, well, it's to kind of protect the boss from there are all kinds of laws to do that anyway. We've got to think about it in a different way. We've got to think about it in a much more subsidiarist way. Because, that's our heritage. That's our Western heritage. Subsidiarity in terms of law, in terms of the quality of men we're raising.
Indeed. Make no mistake. I am not advocating for the situation it is by any stretch of the imagination. However, there is a reasonable explanation for how we got here. And
yes.
Once you can drum up a mob to come after someone, to take something that is theirs in a way that requires a lot of mental gymnastics to even begin to consider it as just, you will find whoever the mob usually targets doing whatever they can to defend themselves. And as Marxism, or the general premises of Marxism and leftism were really starting to gain sort of a global hegemonic hold in the late 19th century, what you see is people whipping up the mob, and the people that they went for were whomever Marx would describe as the bourgeoisie, which is always an ever-moving target. However, if you're a business owner or a landlord, that's definitely you, because you are obviously the bad people. And so it's at that almost epistemic level where you get this idea of, I'm going to see the world insofar as, jealousy, right? He has more than me, therefore he must have stolen. It's been a joke for eternity that, if there are three people in a room and one of them has $5 and the other have nothing, the Marxist will tell you that the one with $5 stole it from the other two. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, it's such a terrible lie. You see, the Marxists, they really pride themselves on their analysis of what's wrong with capitalism. It's seizing away, stealing away the ownership that the worker should rightly have over all of his work, over that he should rightly share in all of the company, and perhaps they may have something there. In some instances, perhaps that might end up being a better model in some groups at some times. Perhaps.
Can I give you a story of a study that was shared with me by a Marxist
Yeah, go on.
about how these co-ops were so great?
Okay.
There was a time when I was much more accepting of talking to these people. And so I was having this long form discussion about whether co-ops were a good thing, to which I was handed this study about sawmills. And in the study, they say, we have determined, that you get your big top idea of, so this is what we were examining. We want to find out who's the most efficient sawmill. And it's 9 billion pages long, because all of these leftist mental gymnastic studies are, right? And so I said, well, let's just cut to the end and see, what the thrust of this is.
Yeah.
So you scroll down to the conclusion, and they say, for those of you who are familiar with sawmills, I'm not making this up, this is not a joke. They say, because the co-op sawmills had made more pressboard than any other sawmill, they were the most efficient. Now, when I say for those of you who know about sawmills, I'm not making this up. Pressboard is a thing that was created out of the waste of sawmills, right? You didn't get good wood. You got, by nature of cutting wood, you produce sawdust, add some glue,
Yes.
You get pressboard. And
PDF, we call it in.
Exactly.
No, sorry. PVC. I'm sorry, not PDF. That's a
portable
digital
document.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
But
it's like this cheap, awful stuff that they make really crap tables out of, but then cover up with something to make it look sheen and nice. Yeah.
And it was quite literally a celebration of inefficiency as efficiency. And I went, I don't even know where to start with this if you think this is good. And as I went back through, by the way, and, because in the middle of a conversation, you certainly can't read it. I think it's actually a 195-page study somewhere in that vicinity. I said, look, this is not what you think it is. This is an example of how they are terrible things. Chat informs me it's MDF.
MDF. Is that the one?
And so, as I tried to explain this, one of the reasons that I have stopped talking to the left effectively is that it was, well, even if that's the case, they still make more of it. And I said, well, that's sort of like saying you make more garbage than anyone else, so you're the cleanest person on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, you see what I was talking about before, the guilds and that kind of thing, they actually had levels of mastery there. You had to attain to something. Things had to be of a certain quality, otherwise, you didn't cut it, MDF or otherwise. Similar situations. Okay, you have groups of monks making amazing cheese and whiskey and stuff like that with these kinds of models. But I'm sorry, but this is not your average worker. Your average worker needs to have responsibilities forced upon them. This is what I'm talking about. And so many people as well. I mean, frankly, right now they would be happy to be slaves. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. So the Marxism it says, oh look, we've analysed everything so perfectly, and we've said, oh look, the fat cat capitalist, the guy stealing the few dollars from you or whatever, he's extracting, he's stealing wealth away from you, but these guys, would they be prepared to take on all of the responsibilities that the guy who has reached managerial level is willing to undertake? This is the real issue here, and this is why. So then they end up attacking hierarchies. Indeed. They end up becoming egalitarian, and what they then they appeal to the laziness. They appeal to the lowest, the basest aspect of the person, and they say, in fact, you just deserve stuff. You just deserve stuff, and this is so far removed from a right-wing view of things, which is that, there are virtues, there are objective things like truth, justice, beauty, that you have to grow and attain to. This is just saying, no, you're fine the way you are, and you just deserve the world and all this crap. and what they end up doing then is exactly the same thing they hate the capitalists for, because you end up not really owning anything anyway. In fact, you end up owning less than you do under a capitalist system. It's all owned by the government. This whole idea of, well, everyone owns everything. That's not how it is. You've got this big centralized state that owns absolutely everything. It might as well just be Amazon owning everything. And sadly, they are so stupid. That's where they're headed. They're stupid.
This is the thing.
I'm sorry to be angry and nasty here, but that's just how it is, isn't it?
It is worth an endless supply of derision. I don't blame you at all. But the egalitarianism, it necessitates that centralized control, right? Because as it turns out, if you equally divided all of the wealth in the world and handed a percentage of it, an equal percentage to everyone, you actually, miracle world, instituted communism, and you walked away for 30 days and you came back, what you would find is people with high time preference would be in a worse situation than people with low time preference, simply on that division alone. Nothing
you would find
else
slaves.
Nothing else would be
a
required dividing line, and you would equally find slaves. You would find people who wanted to be taken care of versus those who would do the caring.
Yep.
People are not equal, and the premise that they are is, I think, again, it is a baser premise that they agree with, right? Because this idea of everyone is equal, but I as my chat likes to tease me with regularly, I am a manlet. I am 5'9", right? I am not equally tall as Yao Ming at 8 feet, whatever he is, right? He is a giant human being compared to me. He's almost two of me, I am not equal to him, and nor could I be, no matter what happened, right? It would just not be the case. And so, even as basic a thing of who can reach the top shelf, the midgets of the world will not be able to, and the incredibly tall people will. And that's just how it will be forever. And I think, again, we have a very tactical choice by the people that we're talking about, right? Because righteously, again, is the premise of equality before the law, which does not mean anything that they say that it does, right? So, these people got sentenced to higher rates simply because they had a criminal record. Like, well, yes, if those people had a criminal record, we would continue to sentence them harsher as well. That would be equality before the law. And this premise that they show up with is that, no, every sentence must be exactly the same under, very ridiculous circumstances. So if you've killed your 35th person, it's just the same as if you had killed your first. Well, no, you kind of have a track record at this point. We know that you are a killer. Go live in the little wooden, in the little stone building and stay there until the end of your life, either by nature of us having ended it or you having grown old. We don't really care. But what we know we're not going to do is let you go kill the 36th person. And they take the idea that they already have and they tailor it to a premise that is good and righteous, right? Which is to say that equality before the law, meaning that, I don't know, your politician, your CEO, your whomever lives under the same law as all the rest of us, right? So he doesn't get to kill people either, whether or not he wants to. Doesn't really matter. Same law for both of us. And that is a good idea. Whereas the implementation that they try for is a horrific and terrible idea.
Yeah. And that's what my book was about, basically. When I say the uniqueness of Western law, I'm talking about law as an objective thing that you can discover rationally. not something that is simply imposed by an authority. It's something that just simply exists outside of and is indeed imposed even upon any authority by God. And so this is, I mean, that's what makes Western civilization fundamentally so very different. I also try to explore, well, what's different about Europeans that they thought this way and they ended up making an advanced civilization that was able to function with those principles. You know, how did that happen? And yeah, I mean, they deny it. I mean, I've got to go back again to this kind of Gnostic way of thinking. It's, you see, the elites who think this way, they think, well, greater control over nature means greater freedom, greater power. And seeing man as a part of nature, wanting to control your fellow man. The problem is the reason that way of thinking has been able to come to dominate in the West, where that kind of thing would have been, typically would have been considered atrocious. You know, the West, where a country like the United States of America could come into existence.
Right.
Which is so centrally focused on freedom and dividing up the responsibility in the kind of way I was talking about before. Very concerned with its place in history in terms of natural law, subsidiarity, all of these things coming to us back, from ancient Greece through Christianity and Rome, obviously. The reason that things have been able to turn is that, the way I see it, the quality of our men now is such that, and don't get me wrong, I still think the majority of, like in America, I think the demographic is like the majority of, white men in America, they vote a very sensible way. Okay. I would say the most sensible way they can.
I like to hope
so. It just seems to be the case. Like 95% of white guys vote for Trump, which I consider to be the most sensible option on the table in terms of Western heritage and preserving that. But generally speaking, things are changing in the West. Men, especially young men, so men under 30s, white or not, in the United States, they are voting very differently. And it's as equal a swing. It's really right the other way. And what can I say? It's just another case of that meme. Good times produce weak men produce bad times produce strong men create the good times. It seems like that, and we've had such a tremendous run in the West, and we're trying to hold on. We're trying to hold on against how is it Trump phrases? Global elites, global interests, all this kind of stuff, perverting the culture, trying to weaken us through every attack vector possible.
Indeed. Though I would suggest that the meme, oh man, here I go fact checking a meme. But there is good point to it. But I think the reality of what you're seeing there is a per capita situation, right? Because if you have 1,000 people and 10 of them are strong men, you have 1,000 men and 10 of them are strong men, then what you see is that you have weak men. And then when hard times hit, that 1,000 people becomes 200, and you still have 10 strong men. But now their influence is expanded. They no longer have to get 990 weak men to follow them. They need 190. And so it is very much a hard times purge weakness. That is, it is just a reality.
And the ability for them to then impose responsibilities and duties on the other men, as well as the necessity to do so, is key there as well at that time. But the problem is, look at the 20th century. The populations have risen. To say dramatically is a radical understatement there, but undoubtedly that's the case, and undoubtedly, to get super right wing on this, it's not all been a terribly eugenic process. I doubt. There's been a lot of subsidizing of, breeding large numbers around those who, as you said before, have high time preference, weaker characters, less conscientious, not the real producers and taxpayers of society. And so we have vast swathes of very weak men, which have created a general culture, so that even where there are men who might otherwise be attracted to, being a family man and doing their duty and things like that, even, where is that? Where is the cultural platform which is feeding them that message? Doesn't exist anymore.
The lack of shame, right? Because to the same discussion of 1,200 men, if you have 10 in each of those scenarios, those 10 guys can probably shame at most 150, right?
Yes.
And their capability to shame 150 doesn't change no matter how many people you throw into this group, right? And so you sort of see this play out right now, where there are limited pockets of the Western world that are very intent on responsibility, on taking duty seriously and not as a joke where, hey, it also means poop, right? And they heavily bring this down upon the limits of their influence. And so where you find these pockets, responsibilities and duties are taken very seriously, and they are, you get kind of a self-policing in the area, because let's face it, no matter how strong of a guy you are, at some point you get up in the morning and go, you know what, I don't want to do this. And as you drag your feet out of bed and you decide, all right, maybe I'll make it to the coffee today, but I'm not going any further. If someone knocks on your door first thing in the morning and says, well, you going to work today? The chances that you go to work that day are about 900 times greater than if nobody said anything.
Exactly.
And it's not shaming in the way that people think. It's quite literally that, you got up, and I was giving some speech the other morning, and somebody in chat was saying, Don, I know you're saying you're not shaming us, but I feel pretty ashamed. I said, well, I'm not going after any of you individually, just there is a standard, meet it or don't, And there is almost a self-imposed shame when someone comes by and says, oh, hey, just so you know, there is a standard. You can do that or not. And what they're really doing is just bringing the choice that you're making to the forefront of your mind and making you examine it. And this is not, when you have, and this is how bad the decay is, right, is when you don't have people saying that, people who otherwise would be the ones to get up and say it, the self-enforcement here, start going, well, Bob doesn't have to go to work. Why the hell should I go to work, right? And it's a serious question.
Yeah. And you see, that's very important for us as males in the society as well, because, and sorry to use male as a noun, an adjective, things like that annoy me. I'm probably a little bit autistic, I should warn you.
Fit right in.
Exactly. I mean, when we're talking about, all the organic relationships in society are gone, most significant is, we're talking about the family, of course, but then outside of the home, we would have had all kinds of institutions and all kinds of groupings where men were together and we were breaking each other's balls, we were, maybe we could end up in a fight, okay, to settle something.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's interfering with that. Nobody's policing that. We're policing ourselves in that group.
Indeed.
We've got our own law within that group. And, I talk about subsidiarity. I talk about these groupings in society being important. I mean, we're so far from all of this, right? That we don't even have all male groups anymore. That's against the law. You've got to have some women in there, right? Which just totally changes the dynamic. We know that it does. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We didn't evolve that way. We evolved. The reason we're constantly hurting on each other. Again, this is another meme, isn't it? The guys are like talking shit to each other's face.
Always.
and then the guy leaves and you say, "Man, I love that guy. He's a great guy. He's a great guy." And the women are saying nice things to each other's face. And when she leaves, "Oh, I hate her. What a bitch."
Mm-hmm.
We just know that that's true, okay? And the reason we've evolved that way is because I need to make sure that you're strong. Because if we go out hunting or whatever, you're going to have to be watching my back. If we encounter another group of guys, we have to kill them first.
Indeed.
Or they could kill us first. If some, like, I don't know, saber-toothed tiger or whatever, I don't know. So, some
sounds
dangerous,
like a good example.
Yeah, let's go saber-toothed tiger. Some saber-toothed tiger just jumps out, and I need to be able to trust that you're, not going to be like, just let me die.
Indeed.
Okay.
And right along the same lines is, if I walk over a hill and there's another tribe there holding spears, it'd be nice to know that I'm not going to look over my shoulder and find out that I'm alone.
Yeah, but exactly. And this is why, so in war, men say, when I was fighting, I didn't think I was fighting for my country or even my family. I was fighting for my friends who were just in the immediate vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they ended up doing. That's natural. That's normal. And where this, I keep using this word subsidiarity, this doctrine of, bring the responsibility back down to the individual as much as possible. That word actually comes from the phalanx, the shield wall. Yeah. And you had the subsidium coming and support. It means support, but in the sense of a phalanx. Okay?
It
There's
is
something very primal. We really understand this, and we understand the importance of it. Our modern world, the life that we're living right now, where we're just going off to a workplace where we don't have the real kinds of responsibility that a man needs in his life. We don't have the men in our life imposing that responsibility in a brotherly way. We're so alienated from all of that. That's what we're alienated from.
Can I suggest that we talk about this in a modern era in a way that I think no one even thinks about? And this has been one of my long-standing theories on this subject, is I am more than a little convinced that this is what post-traumatic stress disorder is. And why, or certainly there are more serious cases of it, and what have people who really lose something because a stressful event happened. But for the vast majority of why can't we get service members back into society, is that you go from a place where there's a guy that for a fact you can put the trust of your life in his hands and call him the worst name first thing in the morning, to which he will answer you immediately with the same. You'll even to the point, because this is how the military works, whether anybody likes it or not, to the point of screaming in each other's faces, and at the end, kind of fall over laughing almost, because it's just keep going, just keep pushing, and you go from there to this radical, individualized nonsense where you can't trust anybody for anything,
and you have no identity.
And this is, the complaint that I have heard from vets the most is, I get back here and I feel alone, because there was once this time in their lives where they had that thing, and now it is gone. And I think part of the reason that we see this happen around the time of Vietnam across the world, right? And again, make no mistake, there are discussions of, we knew this was a thing in World War II, and we just didn't talk about it very much. And again, there are certainly cases where there are people who have lost things, but it wasn't such a pervasive problem because people could come home and there were other people who went there and did the thing, and that was just a general inroad where you could get to going back to, I'm going to the bar on Friday night, we're going to play pool and have a couple of beers and call each other the worst names on the planet, and you could get back into something real again, whereas now it is effectively unlawful for you to do that.
Yeah, you had your bowling team, you had your barbershop quartet, whatever it is. I'm being a little bit on the romantic side now, but you know what but in some ways, no, I'm not. I completely agree with what you're saying. My brother's a vet. He's got PTSD. What can I say? Again, I completely agree with you. I think that also it's not just that they have lost. I mean, obviously it's what they've lost there, but it's also how it's highlighted, because they were off fighting seemingly for freedoms that we have here. So when you come back and you find that you have nothing, it's a very empty existence, and then that you discover is why you were fighting for this existence, it leads to tremendous low self-esteem as well.
True enough. There is Jocko Willink talks about this, is, when you get out, one of the biggest problems that guys have is go find another mission. And I think this serves both purposes, right? Because if you go find a mission, the people you will attract to you are the mission-oriented. They're the same people, right? Or at least the same cut of people, as it were, the same cut of cloth kind of person. They are people who don't think mean words matter, right? It's not the end of the world if somebody calls you a loser, right? And you end up in a very similar environment, and I think that sort of solves both problems.
And it's interesting because, I mean, aside from certain psychedelic drugs, which have proven to be, just because they, it's like a fresh layer of snow, a fresh fall of snow, and the brain can rewire itself again. Aside from that, the very next best treatment for these guys is groups having. Now listen, I don't mean the fake group. Of here is the government employed person, they're going to help you, and it's all staged. It's not real. It's not natural. I'm talking about, these are the groups that the guys seek out, like you were just talking about. They're seeking out men who either have had similar experiences or similar personality. They get it. They want that brotherly relationship again. They want that group. They want that manabund, I don't know what you call it, honor group. They want that back because that's where they feel safe, and rightly so. That's natural. We all have that. This is why young men who they've not even been anywhere, they're committing suicide.
Indeed.
Dramatic numbers. Yeah. They don't have what we need as men. It's been stolen from us. See, these are the things that have been stolen from us. The Marxists lie. I mean, they prey on the worst parts of your nature.
They do.
They don't lift you up. They don't. Your brothers want to lift you up to glorious things.
Indeed.
They want you at your best.
And know that comes through hardship, right? And
of course.
This is another thing is that. You go listen to the World Economic Forum thingy, that is Build Back Better nonsense, the Great Reset, and it's I have nothing, I own nothing, I live in a pod, and I eat bugs,
but it's okay,
and I couldn't be bugs. Happier,
and I couldn't be happier.
If you want to talk to guys into you have to eat bugs and you couldn't be happier, go drop them in the middle of the desert and tell them to get out. And on the other side, they will have eaten bugs and they won't have been happier, right? Because there will have been hardship. There will have been doing those things that really bring people together. And make no mistake, you'll lose a few, right? But that's not what they're talking about. That's not I live in a pod. it is just an acknowledgement of the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
But in the world of why we have young men committing suicide, is that pretty intrinsically, and I think I have two relatively short stories for this, is that guys know that they're missing something, even if they don't know what it is. And if there's no
Yes.
guy there to show you what it is that you're missing, I understand why no one understands what they're missing, right? Because it's not necessarily intuitive. Just, it is intuitive
Yeah.
that something is missing. And the two things for this are, and I'm sure I shouldn't even say this, is, when my son started getting old enough that he's into the teenage years kind of thing, when he'd start going to bed and come by and say goodnight, just punch him in the stomach a little bit, right? Not enough to hurt him, just goofing off a little bit.
Yeah.
And he, as young boys are, starts giggling, and we're playing and we're goofing off and wrestling a little, and he goes to bed.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The first night that this happens, as he's old enough to get there, as soon as he goes to bed, my wife looks at me and goes, "Male bonding is really freaking weird."
Yeah.
I went,
It
maybe,
is.
but this is how it goes.
Like choke slamming my son onto the bed and stuff like that. And
right.
like DDT. Poof, and,
exactly. And all of
the-
us
the-
walk away laughing, right? And
Yeah, nobody's crying.
exactly. And
He likes it.
exactly
For perfectly good reasons. Perfectly good. I have a chapter about this in my book as well. I kind of start off saying, let's say you see two young guys and they're in a fight. And of course, there's a whole ring of guys around them, super excited about what's about to happen. How do you react to that? As a modern Western man, how do you react to that? Do you encourage it? Do you go over and say, okay, here are the rules, now fight?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you try and stop them?
Well,
why would you try to stop them? Is there any scientific reason you're going to try and stop them? No, what they're doing is perfectly natural. And it's a testament to how, in Fight Club,
yeah.
it says, we're a generation of men raised by women. It's a testament to the damage that's been done to us psychologically, to be ashamed of what we are. And we've got no reason to be. And we need that. We need those natural relationships with other people. The largest study ever done about human happiness, it was decades and decades and decades worldwide. Many, many, many people. Absolutely enormous study. Without any deviation, the absolute outcome across the board was that it's human relationships that make us happy. For men, we need to have those spaces where it's only for men. It's only us. We have our own rules. We do our own thing. Yeah, okay, we teach our boys how to fight. But I mean that's just throughout human history, let alone Western history. In Western history, we took it really seriously. Like it was, you're learning how to wrestle, you're learning how to fight with a sword, different styles, all kinds of stuff.
Indeed.
It's a serious business, and we always understood why we were doing it. It's perfectly clear. It's perfectly natural. Just yet another thing we need to get back to. It's all about relationships. About relationships.
In the world of how I think we destroyed this in the West, and again, I have all of the unpopular takes, right, is certainly if you look at the feminist movement, and yes, first wave, you find again the same sort of Marxist leftist indoctrinational nonsense, and what it does is goes out of its way to break down what is infinite generations of wisdom, right? And so you devolve things like the suffragettes. They just wanted women to be able to vote. Well, understand that prior to that exact moment, the idea of voting wasn't that you just got a say in whatever was going on.
Yep.
It was that you were responsible for a thing and you needed to do what you could for that thing. That thing
Yes.
had wants and needs, and this is why you had some say in what was going on. And we diffused the idea of responsibility so far from it, and it's a civic duty. That's the responsibility.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's part of that change that occurred, where rather than it's about imposing duties, it's about insisting upon rights. Oh, this is my right. This is my, and yet, I don't want the responsibility. They want the right to vote, but who's going to war?
Exactly, and
who's the one actually takes responsibility, has actual skin in the game there?
And that is, that was. Because you hear, again, all of this has to be propaganda. Men at large got the right to vote before women. Well, yeah, right, wrong, or otherwise. Quite literally, what they said is, if I'm going to go die for you, I want some say in where that's going to happen, or even if it's going to happen. And when women got the vote, they said, "Yeah, we're not doing that."
Yeah. And hasn't it turned out well?
Oh, exciting!
I'm going to leave it at that before I get myself into trouble. But just take a look. Take a look out your window.
I get the benefit of, for now, having a First Amendment. So I may very well be the guy who's
and a second.
You're not wrong there.
Oh, I would love to own a gun. You've got no idea. You don't understand my pain.
I too was once not legally permitted to own a gun. Then I passed the age of 18 and was legally permitted to own a gun.
That hurts. Wounded. Shots fired. Ouch.
But yeah. No, it's there's another strange thing, right? Is when it's very to the parallels to what we were just talking about, right? You talk to people who have no idea what gun culture in America is, and they just say the dumbest things on earth, the most inhumanly stupid thing you've ever heard in your life. And then you go down to a range for a minute, and you find out that instantly you have walked into a room where there is a sense of responsibility. Is it everyone?
Yeah,
no.
Exactly.
But it is the vast majority of them.
Exactly.
I
would want to teach my daughter how to shoot. And when she's old enough, I will, because we do have ranges here. It's just you have to leave your gun. You have to have an interview with the police, and you have to leave your gun at the locker at the range. And the caliber you're permitted to have here, it's .22. It's pathetic. But listen, I would want to teach my daughter how to shoot because I want her to be responsible. I want to be teaching her, look, here is this tool. It's extremely dangerous. It has very important purposes, and you need to be extremely responsible when you're handling it. I think that's very valuable to be teaching children. It's fashionable now to send them off to these forest nurseries and forest schools in the summer. And, one of the things they're learning is like how to hold an axe.
Yeah.
There's a reason, there's a reason you're doing that. In the kitchen, you're teaching them how to chop something with a knife.
Indeed.
You're teaching them responsibility. You're empowering them. You are strengthening them. And they're going to get a sense of confidence. And like if you teach them how to fight, you teach children how to fight, they become much more assertive. They become much more confident. That's good.
And fight less often.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is, for all of the people who think that if you introduce someone to an idea, they will instantly do it. And you see this as, well, if we permit the Nazis of the world to say anything ever, then everyone will become a Nazi. Like, well, everyone didn't become a Nazi the first time. Shut up, you idiot. But when dealing with dangerous things, if you're introduced to them, you have a respect for what the dangerous thing is and when, if, etc., to engage in said dangerous thing. And suddenly it's not this be thrown in there uncontrolled nonsense where no one has a respect for anything. And this is continuously the story of pitfalls of most of Western society, is that we're happy to have no idea about a dangerous thing and then just engage in it willy-nilly like it's fine. And to the point that I would suggest some part of this is why the Antifas of the world burned down buildings, right? If you went back to the 18th century and set a fire, people were coming for you, right?
Yes.
But now that there's a fire department and somebody else to come take care of it, and I've never known anybody that had to, deal with a serious fire problem, and now we're pulled so far back from it that it's no longer a thing.
You see, that's the other thing is the other thing is the responsibility. It has an exponential growth to it. This is another part of the weakening of men in society as well. It's this this runaway growth of the culture of irresponsibility. But listen, I'm really sorry. I've got to go.
You shouldn't be. I was just thinking that we were coming up on an hour and a half mark, and that was probably the time for that. So, well, hey, thanks for coming down. I certainly.
It's a pleasure. No, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, you're very interesting. You're very accommodating and entertaining of my thoughts, regardless of what direction I end up going in. So that's always very welcome.
It's. I think it is in some ways all we have left for learning, is that the handful of us who are willing to say what needs to be said, sit down and talk about things. And I never mind if somebody comes with an agenda, but I basically never have one.
Well, we've all got ideas in our mind. But if I can try and change some of the ideas in your mind, everybody go and buy my book.
You probably should. Most certainly, if you don't think that we have covered a lot of what Rick's book is about, go watch the first podcast, because we hammered on about law for an hour and a half then.
That was good.
And it was... I would suggest that if you have enjoyed any of the discussion of law and culture, you will probably enjoy Rick's book.
The uniqueness of Western law. The uniqueness of Western law. Go and buy it.
Indeed. I think it's in the description of this video. If not, Rick's other social media is. And if it's not in the description of this one, it's almost certainly in the description of the last one. I don't remember if it got down there this time. But regardless, Rick's social media is down below. Anything else you want to say before we get on out of here?
Just thank you very much, and God bless everyone.
Well, thank you again. As usual, and I'm going to say this as often as possible until people start doing it, remember, fight the progressives wherever you find them, and fight them like your life depends on it, because it does.